Oh, welcome back, everyone. My name is Bob Fopp, and this is the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Welcome back, such as it were. This one's over my head, because I don't own a television receiver. Bob Smith and Steve Gennarelli are going to look back at the old days of independent television in New York City. Channels 5, 9, and 11. According to Bob, they're going to look back at all the shows they watched when they were much younger. Means nothing to me. I haven't been the same since they took off the William F. Buckley program. Now I detest television. The Sopranos, The Walking Dead, Philistines. In any event, if you like television, keep listening to the Outdated Entertainment Hour. You, in the 19th row, get those straws out of your nose. Take them out. There you are. Oh, I wish I hadn't asked for that. Hi, everybody. This is Bob Smith. You might remember me from my days as a reporter and magazine editor for entertainment. And this is the Outdated Entertainment Hour. How are you today? Steve Gennarelli, the famous podcaster, returns with us this time. And we're going to be a little New York City-centric right now. But hey, it's my show. So if you live in Dubuque or something, you'd have no interest in this. Well, I'm sorry. But we're going to look back at the days of independent television, the 60s, 70s, and 80s. On New York City's channel 5, 9, and 11. Those stations meant a lot to us when we were growing up, and we'll give you just a little flashback on, well, the stuff we used to watch, all locally produced, back when independent TV was truly independent, and in many ways, a lot more fun than it is now, if you ask me. So hang on there. Have yourself a Yoo-Hoo, which is one of New York City's favorite drinks. And we will be right back to look back at the glory days. Think black and white TVs, big heavy console sets, that type of thing. We're going to go way back. And we'll be right back. We got to talk about, New York City now, because it happens. We're from that area, you get what I'm talking about. Hey. Hi, everybody. It's Bob Smith. You might remember me from my old days as a magazine writer and somewhat of an entertainment maven. And this is the Outdated Entertainment Hour. And we are going to be a little provincial here. Our guest is Steve Gennarelli. And we're going to look back at the golden era to us of when New York City's independent TV stations were, well, really great. It was before they affiliated with networks and became just another part of the TV landscape, losing their local flavor. But there was a time when they really did have local flavor, right, Steve?
Absolutely. And what we're referring to is Channel 5, also known at the time as Metro Media, WOR Channel 9, and WPIX Channel 11.
That's right. And actually, Metro Media did other things. I think they were also involved with radio, and Metro Media was like the parent company of Channel 5 at that point. Boy, they were great. They were just great because you never knew what you're going to see, and it was always off kilter. And I'm sure they didn't have media strategists and all this other stuff that they have now when it comes to television. They just showed stuff that was in the local interest a lot, and it made it a lot of fun. Oh, from the cartoons to the news to the local program. The local program is what made these things so great because from kid shows to new shows to game shows that were locally produced, it was really quite an era.
They even had kind of competing horror movies.
All three, as I researched it, and now it jogged my memory, all three had a weekly horror movie.
You're
in prime time, right. A couple of them were.
Yeah. Channel 5 had Creature Features, which was very, very popular. I think for the most part, it ran on Saturday afternoon. Chiller Theater. Chiller was on Saturday night, and it had its own little animation of a hand coming up out of a bloody pool of blood. Chiller Theater. And then...
tell them which station that was on.
That was Channel 11, WPIX.
Right.
And then Channel 9, oftentimes right after the wrestling at midnight, at 1 a.m. Sunday morning, they would have a horror movie. I don't think they really had a title to it, though.
They did, it was Fright Night. It would just you'd hear thunder in the background, and then you would just see stills from, like, old
Right.
Universal horror movies like Frankenstein and the Wolfman and stuff like that.
Yes.
From Fright Night, but there was no words to it. It just said Fright Night, and on they went. And Channel 9 of the 3 stations had this unbelievable access to really odd films, really gritty films, stuff I never even had heard of in the theaters, but they would show it. If it was horror, they would put it on, and they had the most adult films, Channel 9 did. Like, they would have edited versions of some R-rated movies long before any other station even thought of doing that. But it was old school because the film still looked like film, and you could see the cuts in them, and yeah, it was like going to your local theater for a matinee, really, but it was on television. It was really great. I really enjoyed it.
They were known for their $1 million movie, and that was on for many, many years. I think it oftentimes would come on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It would be an old
Uh,
black and white movie or sometimes a color movie from the past. It definitely, I was a young kid growing up in Binghamton, New York. We only had channels 2 through 13. So channel 5, 9, and 11 really played a big role in my entertainment back then because you got to see movies and things you'd never heard of. I was getting to be a kind of a movie buff or a TV historian even then. And so I'm seeing these things I read about in books or magazines. And it's like, unless it was for this, I would never have seen them.
well, there's the thing. Even for me, I was in upstate New York, and in the Albany, New York area, we had 3 stations. 4 if you counted PBS, which was on what was it, the UHF? Which was UHF and VHF, but the other one was on the other band, and it barely came in for us from where we
Okay.
were.
Okay.
So we were really in the TV ghetto where we were because we only had the 3 network stations basically, and that was it. Once in a while, if we rotated our antenna, we had a rotating antenna in our garage, we could get Utica, which was an indie station up there, and we could get Channel 5 snowy.
Okay.
I remember looking at Wonderama on Channel 5. It was a children's show. You couldn't get it all the time. Like, the weather was bad, forget it. And plus, we would argue, it's like we had a set in the front, and I had a giant old black and white. I mean, we always bought used televisions. My
Okay.
father somehow had access to used TVs. My black and white set was about, I'd say, maybe 16 inches, and it was heavier than the refrigerator, that thing. You couldn't move it. When you put it on the nightstand, that was it. It was gonna stay there. You couldn't even touch it. It was really archaic what we had at our place, but, yeah, we were entertained. We never felt like we were missing anything even before the advent of cable. And the amazing thing is, it was around '73, I'm not kidding, small Greene County in upstate New York where I grew up, got cable TV for the first time. And back then, all cable meant was you got the stations for the city plus your local stations. That's all it was. But even then, it felt like getting let out of jail because we had 9 and we didn't have 5 on that cable system for some reason, but we had 9 and 11 for the first time. And that meant the Mets on Channel 9, the Yankees on Channel 11. That meant a lot to us.
Oh, absolutely. And these channels really had a flavor, and they like to have the same programs on at the same time for like years on end. For instance, Channel 5 WNEW, they like to have the Bowery Boys, the old Boys shows with Hunts Hall and Gabe Dell on Saturdays, maybe about 1 in the afternoon, and on Sundays on WPIX,
But Costello, right?
Abbott and Costello. I mean, constantly. And I mean, I think young Jerry Seinfeld growing up in the New York area saw those Abbott and Costello things, and that was one of his inspirations for his act and for Seinfeld later on.
It was. So I researched this a little bit, but most of it's off the top of my head, which I'm proud of. I remembered a lot of this stuff without having to look it up. So let's take a look at Channel 5
Okay,
exclusively. Then we'll do 9 and 11. We'll do them in the order of
sure,
the stations that they're in.
sounds good.
But as you said, it used to be a Metro Media station. In its early years, it was part of the Dumont Network, which is legendary for their wrestling coverage, if you remember way back when. And in the '70s and '80s, it offered a real array of TV programs all day. And here's the stuff. I grew up with Wonderama, Bob McAllister,
Right.
and that was a show with a studio full of kids who take part in games and learning contests and stuff like that. They had magic tricks, puppet shows, songs, stories, games, a kids show. Back then, and somebody would come home with a little prize and stuff like that. Once in a while, an actual celebrity would show up big, like an Italian singer who performed at the, in the village or something like that. "Oh, we're gonna have a good time." And then there was the Sandy Becker Show, another kids show, on afternoons. And of course, they had their own version, Romper Room. Romper Room always had its own show in various markets. Like the Romper Room you saw in New York would be different than the Romper
Right.
Room in
That's
Atlanta
right.
or something like that. Channel 5 actually had a program called Columbia Lectures in International Studies,
Hmm. I didn't know about
which
that.
was shown in the morning and the weekends, like 7 in the morning, they would have this collegiate. I don't know who was looking at that, but they did. And you remember they had their own news coverage? All the stations did. All 3 had their own news. But I remember Gabe Pressman the most from
Yes.
Channel 5. Great journalist and a real reporter.
He was so serious. I mean, when you watched him, you thought like the world was ending. I mean, he took things so seriously, and Bill Jorgensen was their main anchor for a long time. I remember him.
That's absolutely right. He was great, yeah. And Channel 5, who longer were in the news division, was the home of Bill Mazer. My all-time favorite local sports personality. He really was. He was a mainstay in the 10 o'clock show. He would take trivia questions. It's like Stump the Amazing, they used to call it. And it's rare that, they people would write in and ask a sports question who would always usually get the answer. Rare anybody could stump him. I got to know him a little. I wouldn't say no, but I got to talk to him a few times during my NBA days when I was a basketball writer association
Very
member.
cool.
Used to
Very
cover the
cool.
Knicks and the New Jersey Nets. Got to talk to him several times in the city. He also hosted a weekly Sunday night sports wrap-up show called Sports Extra, which I fervently watched every Sunday nights at 10 or 11 o'clock it was on. I
It,
watched
it,
every week.
it was on at 10:30 every Sunday night, and that one really resonates with me because as a kid, my dad would have these bus trips to Yankee Stadium. So, we're getting up at the crack of dawn on a Sunday morning, driving 3 hours to New York to go to the Bronx to see a Yankees game. And nothing gave me more satisfaction than here we are, it's late night Sunday night. We're staying up to watch ourselves on the TV. And you're seeing these highlights of a game. Again, this is long before SportsCenter, long before ESPN, and you're seeing the same game you just attended, a few hours ago. And it was so exciting just seeing that. And a lot of their most popular hosts on Sports Extra, besides Bill Mazer, they had Lee Leonard, they had Jerry Eisenberg, who was a top New York sports writer, Art Shamsky. They had Art Shamsky, I think,
Right, yeah.
John Lockery. And but it was just a great show. I really enjoyed it. Long before SportsCenter, this was our go-to, especially
It
for the New York
was.
fans.
Bill Mazer is a personal hero to me, and I'll tell you why. It was a different era, I know, but he was genteel, he was friendly, no shouting, no screaming, no heart attacks, as a sports pundit. He was meat and potatoes, and he had a heart as big as he was. Bill Mazer was a great guy, and he will always be my favorite New York sports guy. From the time I was a teenager to the time he went off the air. And later on, he had a radio show in New York City, so he wasn't, far away from the media landscape, but he had a good long life and a good long career. As you may know, you remember too, he used to announce wrestling up when he worked in Buffalo.
Right.
And those tapes exist to this day. So, Bill Mazer, Channel 5.
And I think he was blind in one eye too, so more power to him for being able to do all this.
I did not know that. 10 o'clock news itself, they had a myriad of hosts and reporters, but it's best known to this day, my friend, for its announcement before every broadcast. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
That was always scary.
Do you know they still do it?
They really?
They do.
I had no idea.
Yeah, they're still doing it to this day. So that's the one tradition that station has continued through the decades. Channel 5, the Soupy Sales Show, right?
Right.
Soupy and Bang and the pies being thrown and just pure mayhem. I was always a Soupy Sales fan. Merv Griffin was on prime time on Channel 5. I think they put his show up against like the network fare.
Usually like from 9 to 10, sometimes maybe from 8 to 9, but it was at least an hour, sometimes even longer, a variety show. He would come out and sing. He had his MC. He'd have guests, people promoting movies and TV shows on, and he was a very entertaining guy, a very good host, very relevant for decades in the show business.
Yep, he really was. Any other memories of Channel 5 that really stick out to you?
I mean, as a kid, again, I'm in grade school watching this. My fondest, earliest memories was coming home from school. This is in the early 70s, probably like 1971. They would have reruns of Lost in Space on at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I really loved those. And over the years, I mean, they would rerun a lot of the really popular TV shows from the 60s and 70s continuously. Shows like Gilligan's Island, Andy Griffith Show, Brady Bunch, Partridge Family. And as the years went on, whatever was the latest new hot show off of syndication, they would show those reruns. It definitely was probably some of the most popular shows that that station ran were just reruns of classic network shows.
They had pretty good cartoons too.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Woody Woodpecker. I also remember Popeye being on Channel 5, or at least for a while.
Well, you mentioned it. Like one drama was this unbelievable thing for kids because it would come on Sunday morning. I think it was probably like 8 a.m. If it wasn't cartoons, the one drama itself was like this glorified game show for kids.
Mhm.
And kids would pick a jar and open it up, and there'd be some prize or something in there. And it was so exciting for a kid watching that show because it was like almost like a game show just for children.
Every local area that had a show with kids on it, local kids, every kid in school wanted to go on that show.
Yeah,
That's all I know.
yeah.
In upstate New York on Channel 6, we had a show called The Freddie Freihofer Show. Talk about ad placement. Freihofer is a bakery, bread and rolls and sweet stuff. They had a guy named Freddie playing a guy named Freddie Freihofer, and all the kids would be there. And I remember my sister got to be in the show, and my whole family said, Darla's gonna be on Freddie Freihofer, and it was a big deal for anybody. And you weren't really on the show. It's just they just showed a whole mess of kids
Right.
sitting there going, "Yay," and your kid may be one of them. So, it was the usual thing. All these shows were the same. They had little contests and prizes for everybody, and everybody had a wonderful time, and sometimes the simple stuff was all you needed. So let's move over to anything else for Channel 5, or should we move to Channel 9? You know something? It was a very genteel station, Channel 5. It was a quiet station. I don't know how to put it. Like, it was very like, the announcements between shows were always sort of like this.
Ding.
Coming up next, it will be, David Susskind or whatever was on there. I think David Susskind was on Channel 5. Am I right about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, maybe after Sports Extra, like 11 o'clock on a Sunday,
Really late.
like that.
Yeah. Really late at night. They would have a panel discussion on the events of the day.
Sure.
Very genteel station, Channel 5. Then we moved to Channel 9, which was the everyman station of the 3, I think. Channel 9 would throw anything on there, and that's what I loved about it. I loved Channel 9. The Mets were on there. One of my favorite things about Channel 9 is they would run editorials, like man on the street editorials. My name is John Peterson, and I'm from Newark, and he would talk about something that was upsetting him, and that would be like a 1-minute editorial in the middle of a movie or the middle of a show, just any
Right,
show, they would throw an editorial in.
right.
And I know that those editorials were the inspiration for the episode of All the Family where Archie Bunker did a TV editorial.
Yeah.
He was arguing with Mike Stivic, and Mike would go, "Why don't you go on and give an editorial?" He says, "I think I will." And the next thing you know, you see Archie give an incoherent but unintentionally hilarious editorial about guns. And I'm telling you that's based on Channel 9. There's no question in my mind that it was. So and they always did local ads where they would at the holidays, you remember this? It was like they'd get the station employees' kids to pose in front of a tree, and they would
Right.
all say one line in a Christmas. The Channel 9 family wishes your family a very happy holiday and a happy new year. And then they would all wave in front of a tree,
Right, right.
right? Right? So I love local TV. And what's more local TV? What Channel 9 show ran for 42 years? I can just tell you. He's
Tell
looking
me.
at the sky. The Joe Franklin Show.
Of course.
Joe Franklin in the wee hours of the morning, no matter he moved around a little bit, it was always very late at night, and he would have anybody on his show. Now, Joe Franklin has been immortalized by Billy Crystal on Saturday Night Live,
Yes.
and the beautiful thing about the Billy Crystal impersonation of Joe Franklin, he would go into this rant. We're sponsored by Mountain Paints. It ain't just paint. Sponsored by Strice for the unleavened experience of a lifetime. The amazing thing about the Billy Crystal impersonation, he lifted that. That is what Joe Franklin literally used to say, and everybody thought they were jokes.
Right. Yeah, it was authentic.
It's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and and he had that monotone voice. We have a singer from New Jersey doing great. She's in all the clubs right now. Let's have her start her song right
Right.
now.
No.
And then the person would lip sync to their record.
What
Beautiful.
I liked about him, because again, as a kid, I'm buying these books about old movies and, researching all this about the history of showbiz. And he was this guy that, like, if you remember the early Joe Franklin shows, like maybe the ones in the 70s, he always kind of leaned into the history of showbiz and wanted to take you back and show you like before the talkies, like what were the silent movies like? What was, Douglas Fairbanks like, or the Tom Mix, or those old, Charlie Chaplin day
Well,
characters.
the theme song was that rinky tink daddle daddle
Yes,
daddle daddle. And it was that rinky dink song, and they showed Chaplin on the screen,
yes,
and they showed all the old school comedic heroes from the silent film days and
yeah,
things
Ben
like that.
Turpin, people like that.
Ben Turpin, that's right. So, uh, it and once in a great blue moon, he'd have a major star in the show.
Oh, yeah,
Like Carol Channing would stop in or
yeah,
somebody of that nature, and all the Broadway people would go there.
and he'd had that really eclectic sofa and chair with, you could have Carol Channing, but next to her would be Lou Albano, and you'd have, some, painter from New Jersey, and, all these different people with different things that they're famous for. It was very funny.
Supper Club, Borscht Belty,
Yeah.
he'd have a comic, but he'd be playing the Catskills and stuff like that. It was just that was New York. Joe Franklin show was New York City, man. It was so bad it was great. Let's be serious. It was just so I don't know, it was genteel, and I miss that.
When I found it again in the 70s, it was, I think it was more thought of more seriously, and I think he probably had a better time slot. But we got into the 80s and maybe even in the early 90s, I think his show was on like at 3 a.m. in the morning. It just got so bizarre and so kind of almost like a forgotten thing, but he was still on the air.
To be honest, he got really old too. I
Yeah,
mean, he did it until he practically couldn't walk, and I'm
yeah.
not putting him down for that. He just stayed on the air. You ever see the picture of him in his office
Yes.
where it's with nothing but old newspapers stacked to the ceiling, and
Yeah.
it looked like it should have been condemned, but that was his office. I had a guy who worked with one of the magazines that was like that. He had his own office, and it was nothing but old. I don't know why he had old newspapers. We weren't doing newspapers, but he saved everything. People are strange. Anyway, also on Channel 9, but also nationally was the Martin Downey Jr. show.
Right.
The first low rent, scream at each other talk show, really. It preceded all that other stuff, Jerry Springer and all those things.
Yes.
But on the other end, they had Firing Line, late night political talk show hosted by the conservative William F. Buckley, which ran during the 1970s.
Moved over to PBS over the years.
Yeah, that's right. But you and I talked about this. The oddity of all of Channel 9's daily weekday programming was the Journey to Adventure with Gunta Les.
They had a lot of travelogue type shows and European, type shows, like the World at War, that great World War II,
Mhm.
documentary was on there all the time.
Let me talk about Journey to Adventure a little bit. It was a daily film travelogue to exotic ports of call all over the world, featuring, well, Gunther Less. And the show ran. Did you know it ran for 39 years?
Wow.
It was on for 39 years. It was also a parody on one of the Firesign Theater albums, the comedy troupe Firesign Theater.
Sure.
They did a parody where we were going to visit the hot Chuckaluttle Springs. Do you know Sundays was invented there, making it a vacationer's paradise? This is silliness, yeah. But at its conclusion, it ranked as the second longest running TV show in America
Really?
at that point when it went off, yeah. Unparalleled. I mean, it was an experience. It was and some of the films were kinda grainy and the sound would warble in the background, but they showed him, and he would be at the beginning and ending of each show, and he wished us happy travels at the end of every show.
You know,
You couldn't possibly put that on the air now.
it's not that different than the wrestling of that era. In the WWF, you had guys like Carlos Rocha. You had guys from every country representing them, and it really had an international flavor. And shows like this, these travelogue type shows, it was almost like they wanted to have shows on the air in New York for the immigrants, I think, to see that, hey, you're welcome here. Well, we acknowledge you, and you're important to us.
Nothing else like it. We'll go on to the movie offerings of showing. Like I said, they had the most unbelievable they'd have obscure indie films to the Hollywood blockbusters of the '60s and stuff like that. And sometimes they'd offer movies that were kind of adult in nature, which I appreciated. It was the stuff the networks wouldn't get near. We talked about Fright Night, but they also had different placards when they put a film on, and they weren't always necessarily on at the same times. Like Monday Movie Classics was the name of one of the shows.
Right.
Friday Night Movie, the 4 o'clock movie. Remember they had a movie out every day at four
Oh,
o'clock.
yeah.
But what we all remember, of course, was Fright Night with all the horror stuff. But it was the $1 million movie on after the WWF at 1 in the morning. It's where I first saw my favorite movie of all time. The producers with Gene Wilder and Zero Mostel. Also saw Yankee Doodle Dandy with Jimmy Cagney, Hans Christian Andersen with Danny Kaye. They had the stuff the networks wouldn't or couldn't show, and I really appreciated that,
Now,
you know?
I remember those movies too. The the ones that I remember are the really kinda like grade B or grade Z horror movies. Like, I remember from the 1950s, The Man Who Turned to Stone, that was a really, bad one. What else? I remember seeing, you mentioned Jimmy Cagney, when he did the tour when he did the, Man of a Thousand Faces, the biography of Lon Chaney Sr. I remember that. That was on Channel 9.
One of my favorites for Fright Night was Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
Wow.
This C-grade 1972 or so horror movie where a bunch of people are making it. They float off on their ship or on a boat to an island so they can make this horror movie.
Oh, really?
Little knowing that zombies were also on the thing and in the island, and it was like it was a shoestring budget, but it is a classic that people talk about to this day in terms of low budget filmmaking that was really effective. They also had a horror movie, a psychological horror film called The Baby, which is one of the most twisted films I have ever seen, and they showed it on uncut on Channel 9. Just a
Really?
twisted, but then they'd have stuff like Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman,
Yeah,
Frankenstein's Daughter,
the
stuff like that.
classics, yeah.
King Kong versus Godzilla. They showed that a million times. Yeah.
Well, usually for, Thanksgiving, they'd have a marathon of King Kong, Mighty Joe Young, sometimes Mad Monster Party. I mean, they really like to roll out the, King Kong during Thanksgiving.
And then they had their all-night programming, which they called 9 All Night, which would be a movie followed by something you never heard of, followed by something you never heard of, but it was on all night. And, of course, they were at home in the New York Mets broadcast featuring Lindsey Nelson, Ralph Kiner, and Bob Murphy. Unlike what people tell me these days, because 'cause they're full of it, they never Channel 9 or not never showed every game of the Mets and Yankees.
You're right.
People go, "Oh, I used to tune in and just turn on Channel 9 and be on every day." No, it wasn't. In fact, the station showed anywhere from Channel 9 showed anything from 50 to 100 games until the agreement ended in 1998. It was never the entire schedule. We all had to rely on the radio in those days. Can you believe it?
Well, getting half the games, I think is very fair, honestly.
Yeah, I do too. And speaking of the Mets, Bob Murphy, a former announcer who passed away some years ago, also hosted Channel 9's Bowling for Dollars for a while.
Right?
The local show that was on in different markets around the country. They had other hosts, but for a while, Bob Murphy was your host. Well, let's see if you can get that straight. It was just so corny. It was wonderful.
And on the weekends, they would do that show, that syndicated show with Dick Engbird, that, Sports Challenge, that game show.
Sports Challenge. I love Sports Challenge.
Yeah.
Walt Frazier. They'd have 3 sports guys, right? It'd
Yes.
be like it'd be like Walt Frazier, Mario Andretti, and, Danny Cater. It was just
Yeah.
you never knew who was gonna pop up on the show. Steve Garvey, that was the era for that.
Yeah, I was a big hockey fan. They had lots of hockey on Channel 9 and basketball too, but I was a big New York Rangers fan. We had Bill Chadwick do the games there, the big whistle, with Jim Gordon. We had Kiner's Corner, of course, after the Mets games. You and I had SCTV before the wrestling came on. That's how we got introduced to SCTV when it was just a syndicated show from Canada. We had the wrestling that you and I, of course, loved from New York, the WWF wrestling. For me, I don't think you were a big fan, but I was a big fan of Howard Stern, and he was on Channel 9 from 1989 to 1991 with his first TV show, and they had tons of ads for Snapple during the show. So those were all fun memories.
I remember looking at the Stern Show.
Yeah,
It was just kind of film version of his radio show at times, and they
pretty
would
much.
package it
Yeah.
together. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they'd show Stuttering John go out and do some goofy interviews. Howard would sit there with Robin, and they'd have some hot girls come in, and it was just a wild show. It was, aired on Saturday night at 11, kind of get you ready for Saturday Night Live. And it was just a very irreverent show for its time.
Certainly was, and he's on to this day on Sirius XM, which is it
Absolutely.
must be some kind of a record. It's gotta be, what, 35 years or something like that? It's crazy that he's been
Oh, yeah,
from
for a
his
long
radio
time.
days to now, it's gotta be a very long time.
Sure.
Alright, are we ready for Channel 11?
I think we are.
Oh, man, I locally produced shows, no matter what market they were always something else, and for some reason, when I thought of Channel 11 for this edition of the show, I thought of this pair of shows that was on back to back in the daytimes. They were children's shows. One of them is so fondly remembered. It was called The Magic Garden. Do you remember The Magic Garden?
I guess they do kind of their own version of a Star Trek convention. They go out and do
No, they
Magic Garden
don't. No,
conventions.
they actually still come into theaters and sing their songs and do that show,
That's
and it
amazing.
still draws in Long Island. I remember working for Good Times and writing up the fact that Carol and Paula are gonna be at, like, the Bolton Center or something like that,
Right.
and, and they even made it an album, and it was really low budget local TV at its best. It was Carol Demas and Paula Janis, who were both really teachers, ex-teachers in real life. They would sing songs, read jokes from the Chuckle Patch, and talk to Sherlock the Squirrel Puppet. Basically, they taught kids to sing along and how to be nice, which is pretty admirable. I mean, it was just this very genteel, very sweet little show that was on for a half hour every day. They have a DVD that's selling for like $250 because it's out of print now. They really do have this cult following of kids who are now full-grown adults who grew up on the Magic Garden. It was one of the big successes for Channel 11. It's so dated and so sweet that I get all goosey just thinking about the fact that everybody would watch Magic Garden, all the kids.
Well, I remember they always would have a cool little segment on the show where this guy had this easel, and he just all of a sudden is making these beautiful paintings just off the cuff. He's just doing them, and he did that often on many of the shows, and it was so inspiring. I'm sure there were many kids, especially in the inner city, are seeing this, and they're all of a sudden they have art appreciation, and they're probably out asking their moms or dads or their teachers, "Can I get stuff to paint with?" It was so inspiring.
And as part of a double header, they also had a show locally produced called Joya's Fun School.
Yes.
And I remember this song, "It's Time for Joya." And the host was Joya Sherrill, who reportedly was formerly a jazz singer with Duke Ellington,
Mhm.
with the Duke Ellington big band. It makes sense because she sang the theme song at the beginning of the episode, and Duke Ellington, I read, actually appeared on the show once to talk
Really?
kids about
Really?
jazz or something like that.
I had no idea.
Usual kiddie stuff, songs, games, puppets, things like that. I just remember one episode where she was teaching kids to be quiet.
Really?
Like, "There are times when the adults are speaking where you have to keep your mouth shut," or words to that effect. But she didn't do it in a mean way. It was like, yeah,
Informing
just
him.
know your role, children, if you could. I'll never forget that one. The show bounced around in various time slots during its run. It ran from 71 through 82. Channel 11 was awesome for kids stuff. They also showed in the 60s, and for some reason they revived it in the 70s, A Day with Doodles. Doodles Weaver, the unfunniest comedian in the history of Hollywood, did these silent films with a rinky-dink background and a narrator. "Oh, here comes Doodles. He's going fishing. Watch out for that hook." Boing, and it would end up in his arm and things like that. It was astoundingly unfunny, and there were color shorts, and they ran in the late 60s, but I saw 'em when they revived the show in the 70s, and I was like, I was still a kid. I'm like, "What am I watching? This is terrible." Yeah, but they kept bringing it back. Oh my god. And for a while, they brought in this long block of kids programming in the late afternoon. They had the Three Stooges. They brought back the Three Stooges in the '80s too. But they had something called the TV Picks game.
Yes, I remember that.
Do you remember this
Yes.
where you'd have to look at the screen and go, "Picks, picks"? There was like I think you were trying to do you remember what the game was? I remember people would say "Picks," and I guess it was like they were firing rockets on the screen and you would
Yeah,
make the gun go off or something?
it was kinda was not that different than Space Invaders, but
Yeah, yeah.
like, you kinda wondered how come somebody just didn't say, like, "Pick, pick, 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 pick." It was
I remember that.
It was just it was a hot thing for them for a while, like in the afternoons, probably in the summertime.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Well, I remember tuning in once, and the kid got it. He's like, "It really doesn't matter." So the kid just went, "Picks, picks, 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 picks," and he won, and I think the station went, "Oh, they're on to us now. That's all they need to do to win the big prize." So you realize it ended not long after that. It was like this only lasted like a year or maybe 9 months, but the picks game, the TV picks game, uh but the kids would get a prize, right? It would I forget what the prize was though, but, and there was an announcer going, "All right, Johnny, you ready?" You know, one of those things,
Right.
and, ah, it was wonderful in its awfulness. It was just great. But let's go back to horror. Now we know the Yankees, of course, the Phil Rizzuto, Bill White years.
Yes.
Tom Seaver was an announcer too there.
Yeah.
Bill White, um,
Frank
Frank
Messer.
Messer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and, those were great days. I just really fondly remember all of those guys and enjoyed them all. They were great. I like Bill White. Bill White, who went on to be I guess, the National League president.
Yeah.
He was a really good color man. He was fantastic.
Yeah.
Except I remember one time though.
Mhm.
Apparently, he had no pop culture. They pointed a sign, an electronic sign at Yankee Stadium, and he goes, "Oh, look there, Phil. The Yankees welcome Billy Joel." So apparently he had no idea who Billy Joel was, but,
Well,
so anyway,
this weekend is Hall of Fame weekend that we're recording this, and he's going to be honored this year, Bill White, for all of his achievements in baseball. So that's very, very cool.
that is very cool. I had no idea, my friend. You're leading me into something I did not know. But then again, every kid's favorite Channel 11 show, Chiller.
Yes, on a Saturday
That
night.
remember the hand with 6 fingers coming out of the ground, and
Yes,
then it would kinda the hand would bend down and the arm would bend down and the hand would eat the words in Chiller, and then it would sink back into the pit that it came from.
a bloody
Who didn't
pit.
love that? Who didn't love that? Seriously, no. But their fare was more classic, I think, than Channel 9 was. Like, Channel 9 would put some, Son of Kong on and things like that, but Channel 11, I think, had the more classic Universal
Yeah.
Dracula films and the really, really just a better breed, a higher class breed of horror movie on Channel 11.
Well,
Eh
getting back to the Yankees just a little bit. Their top rainout shows for rainout theater were F Troop and Get Smart. So if you're in a rain delay, you might be seeing F Troop or Get Smart. I and the network was famous not only for the Yankees, but the famous reruns of The Odd Couple, The Honeymooners, Star Trek, and The Twilight Zone. Those were the perennial Channel 11 shows that were on for decades and almost would never leave the air.
Well, let us not forget, though, the immortal, to me, block of The Honeymooners and The Odd Couple, one after the other. Now, at one point, they showed it for a long time at 11 o'clock, and for a spell, they had it on at 5 p.m. and 11 o'clock, the same block of 2 shows, different shows, but they were on. That may be my favorite thing of all time on Channel 11. I watched it all the time as a kid, as an adult. They stayed together for at least a couple of years. The Odd Couple disappeared, but they kept the Honeymooners going. Do you remember that block? Do you remember them being kind of like
Oh,
buddies for an hour?
I do, and not just those 2 shows, but they usually followed it up with Star Trek at midnight and Twilight Zone at 1 o'clock. And all of those shows were so vital and so important to Channel 11. I mean, for a certain segment of the audience, Channel 11 was the Star Trek channel. Twilight Zone in later years, more recent years, they run marathons on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I'm sure if it wasn't for the impact that it had made on Channel 11, WPIX, it never would have garnered the attention of the people running the Sci-Fi Channel. But those shows, The Odd Couple, I mean, you and I have talked about it before. I think it's the greatest sitcom of all time. I mean, Seinfeld is right up there, but there's something so timeless about The Odd Couple. It's so underrated.
It's just like the play. You can not update it and still run it in community theater, and it's been revived on Broadway 2 or 3 times, It's just timeless. It's a timeless slob versus neat freak. It's just it always works. But in any event, yeah, and it amazes me to this day that Channel 11 in New York is still showing The Honeymooners. That it's gotta be some kind of a record. They have had that show on my entire life that I remember. You know, I know it went away for a little while, but they keep bringing it back. They just keep bringing it back. Now it's, like, kind of buried on a Saturday night, I think at midnight and 12:30,
Well,
but it's still there. It's still
it's
part of the network.
something very comforting to knowing it is still there, and, I'm gonna give you a title now of a show that has to be probably the most bizarre show I can remember Channel 11 ever running. Do you remember a show from the mid-80s? It actually was produced in Australia, Prisoner Cell Block H.
I remember that. I
Re
do. It was this tawdry, like, prison Miller, and it had all kinds of sexual innuendo and violence, and yeah, that was rough stuff, I recall.
Yeah.
Kinda controversial in its day.
A very different show, women in prison, and, it was on WPX, like, right in prime time, I mean, 11 o'clock at night, the old odd couple slot.
Now, let's finish up with the advertisements. The locally produced, for the most part, ads that were just so awful that they were great, right? They were always entertaining, and I have a list of them here, and they're all off the top of my head. I'm proud of this because it shows I can't remember my birthday, but I can remember the fact that the SM Rose car dealership did these filmed ads that were all over independent New York TV in the '70s. Just a small down payment or your trade-in may do. I mean, it's like, you don't forget for some reason, I don't forget stuff like that. It was such a carny pitch, you know? But they were around, and I guess they were a popular car dealership in the NYC area.
It was a kinder, simpler time.
It certainly was. Do you remember Sims clothing stores?
Yes.
SYMS? Where an educated consumer is our best customer. But you know what? The Sims family remains a big deal in the New York City area. I think her name is Marcy Sims, is part of some charities here, and there's a Sims Foundation that does, like, charity type work. So the name remains here, even though the stores are gone.
Excellent.
Then there was Catskills comedian Freddie Roman for Bond's men's clothing stores. I had no idea as a kid who Freddie Roman was. I didn't know who Freddie Roman, and then I found out he's one of the most legendary of all the Borscht Belt Catskills comics. Did
Yes.
you ever see him perform?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Isn't it amazing? I always kinda went, "Oh, that's old people stuff," right? And then I saw Dick Capri live, and I went, "I want more of this." No, seriously, oh my god, these one-liners and all this stuff. I wanted more. I love the Catskills stuff now, whereas as a hip 23-year-old, I thought it was corny and old, but then when I actually heard them work, I was like, "Give me more of this," and to this day, I keep seeking out the Catskill style comics.
Awesome, awesome.
Did you ever actually see a Catskills veteran perform live?
I don't think so, no.
Well, I think there was a show called Catskills on Broadway for a while, where a few of them just did their bits, and I think it ran for, like, 3 years, so, you know, obviously, I wasn't alone in finding these people just enjoyable and funny. And speaking of comedy, Uncle Floyd Vivino playing his rinky-dink honky-tonk piano for Wild West City in Jersey commercials. A city running wild, right? Do you remember this?
Uncle Floyd had to have the greatest cult TV show of the early '80s, better than any of the others.
Yes, and I discovered it very, very late, not living in the area. Channel 4, New York City's NBC affiliate, picked it up, and they were showing it, like, 1:30 in the morning, Uncle Floyd reruns. That's how I got to know Uncle Floyd and all that wacky stuff. And then, more city ads, we had Yogi Berra for Yoo-Hoo chocolate drink.
Of course.
Of course. He was in the programs too. Of
Right.
every program I would pick up at the ball game, there was
Yeah.
I wonder if he's involved with the company. I have no idea, but he was certainly their spokesman. I personally knew the woman. This is another ad that ran for years. May's Department Stores, and she sang, you might remember this, "Every day's a sale day at May's." That was their and I had a job where she happened to be working there. I guess she was just a dabbling professional singer and did ads, and that was her, and it knocked me down to it knocked me over to find out that she did a TV ad. It was great.
How about Phil Rizzuto for the Money Store?
Phil Rizzuto, The Money Store. That's right. And those hilarious Coco Goya ads featuring aging Broadway legend Hermione Gingold. I wanna know how a tropical drink company decided that an 80-year-old woman who was about 4 feet tall would be a great spokesman. It doesn't even make sense. Well, all I know is that they were very funny, and there was one ad where she was dancing with these giant Chippendales type guys doing a conga line, and then there was another one where she was, like, laying on a couch and shaking the Coca-Cola cans like they were maracas. You have to see these ads to believe them. That one you can see on YouTube. I ran into that one, so good lord, that was weird. Newmark and Lewis ads for electronics and TV, as along with, of course, Crazy Eddie's, where their prices are crazier than me.
How
Remember the guy in the Napoleon outfit?
Yes. How about, beautiful Mount Airy Lodge?
Beautiful Mount Harry Lodge. I don't even have to think I remember all these ads. One of my also unintentional favorite ones was Lenny's Clam Bar, where they interviewed local folks about what their favorite items were in that newfangled concept, the salad bar. Well, I like the rib tips, the egg salad. I like, it's just, wow, a salad bar. I never dreamed of such a thing. Wow, I gotta go there. Do you remember the locally made Meineke muffler commercials?
Yes, I do, yes.
Because they were on in wrestling, during wrestling. In fact, I think they had one ad with a fake wrestler on it, if I'm not mistaken. Remember
Yes.
the guy would get up, I'm not gonna pay a lot for this muffler or something. I don't remember what it was, but the nationwide auto auctions. They showed this young woman, she goes, come here," and then the mouth got big on the screen and said, "To a nationwide auction," with an echo behind it, and they would just say, "Any car, new cars, old cars, come to the nationwide auto auction."
Channel 9 used to have, especially during the wrestling at midnight, they used to run ads for these really exploitive, like, R-rated movies, and even some really weird titles. I remember there was always that one that would say, "There will be no Christmas this year," and, they'd have these most bizarre movies, advertised during the
Oh,
wrestling.
yeah. The local drive-in movie ads. Yeah, there was one, I think I explained this to you before we started taping. You see what looks like a little girl with her back to the camera, and it's a black
Yes.
background, and then the announcer says something like, "You just keep telling yourself, it's only a movie. Only a movie." Oh, and then the little girl swings around, and she's got this horror face like an old gnarly woman, and she screams, "Ah!" And I remember it was called The Last House on Dead End Street, rated R. And the last house, because it sounded like the other one, The Last House on the Left, so they made another one that kinda copied it.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff. I love exploitation movies to begin with, so that's right up my alley, to be honest with you. Potemkin Cadillac, which sometimes featured Italian standard singer Sergio Franchi, and playing the piano, singing the Potemkin song, and the Potemkin was always on the ads in New York City.
Do you
The
remember, ads for Peter Lemon Jello Records?
Yes, I do, yes. Peter Lemongello. Chevy Chase did a beautiful parody. Peter Lemon Mood Ring. Remember he would change colors depending on the song he was singing, right? Local ads were all over the place. Bell Atlantic Yellow Pages. Siemens Furniture Store with the jingle. You gotta see Siemens first. Levitt's Furniture commercial. You'll love it at Levitt's. Petland Discounts featuring owner, and I couldn't make out whether he was Neil Patrick, or Neil Panda or something. It always sounded different every time he said it. And he was talking about discounts, save money on this leash, or a lot of times they would advertise aquariums for some reason, mostly fish stuff. The hotel ads, right? The Hotel Seville, the Lullaby of New York, the Milford Plaza, and my favorite, which I thought was a little suggestive, the ad for the Hotel Collingwood. You see a woman, first, at the beginning of the ad, you see a woman walking out of a building from the left to the right. And then you see a guy walking out of another building from the right to the left. And they meet up, right? And then you see, they're at a carnival or something. And then you see them in an outdoor bistro. And you see the woman smiling and kind of nodding her head. And the next thing you know, they're at the Hotel Collingwood. Oh my gosh, I am telling you, you could only take that ad one way. It was like, you wanna come to the Hotel Collingwood goes. It's like, now everybody knows about the Carvel ads with Tom Carvel. Wednesday is Sunday at Carvel with Dumpy the Pumpkin and Wookie the Witch and Cookie Puss. I gotta tell you, I was in a Carvel recently because all I can eat is soft food, so I've been eating a lot of Carvel. It was a Saturday. I am telling you, if 15, 20 people weren't standing in line to buy cakes. I've never seen anything quite like it. The frozen ice cream cakes?
Yeah.
One after another, after another, after it was amazing to me. That's what's keeping Carvel going. It's those cakes. They're great for any occasion, including me sitting there with a fork in front of it. So, it's what it is.
The concept of a ice cream cake is kind of foreign to me. I've never really had one. Once you have it in your mouth, do you have to chew on it or does it melt?
No, it's ice cream. The only thing that is kind of hard is not even hard. Is crunchies, the chocolate crunchies.
The crunchies, yes.
And they have different flavored icings and whatnot. So it's kind of like, it's just really glorified ice cream with a little, maybe sometimes there's a hard bottom with the crunchies and then and the crunchies in the middle. Some of them have more than 2 or 3 layers.
Interesting.
And this- the Cookie Puss is kind of a revelatory just because there's something from everybody. His nose is a cone. His eyes are flying saucer sandwiches, ice cream sandwiches. Nobody can pick him apart, which is kind of gruesome when you think about it, and enjoy this giant face that you're eating. So, yeah. All right. The Grand Prospect Hall. Will you make your dreams come true? Do you remember this? It's just a big wedding reception place where you
Sure.
could have your wedding there. We talked about beautiful Mount Airy Lodge, but the oldest New York City commercial that is still running, 800-588-2300 Empire Carpeting.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
the song Empire? That's still going.
They may even put
They
those on the Jim Cornette show. I may have heard him on that.
they put an Empire Carpeting ad on Jim Cornette.
I believe so.
Geez, some old wrestling managers have all the luck. Why can't I get an ad like that for the show? Good gravy. So, in short, I know as a teenager into at least the time when TV changed, the independent New York stations were my favorite. I would get my news from them, Jerry Gerard Sports on Channel 11. I watched those stations more than I watched the networks because I've never been an episodic TV person. I much prefer, I don't know, anything else, but, I'm basically sports and news and a couple of that's about it. But my memories of growing up watching Channel 11, well, 9 and 5. One of the things that made me wanna move down here, I'm a New Yorker now and have been since, the 1980s, and I think it's the best move I ever made. So I love being a New Yorker, and I love old school New York TV. Steve, the floor is yours. Tell us your overall feelings about those times.
The greatest times of my life, other than meeting my wife, of course. Watching the Yankees with Bill White, Bill Rizzuto, and Frank Messer, those are the happiest days right there. Watching wrestling on Channel 9, WOR. In fact, for a brief time there, like 1978 to about 1980 or so, if the Knicks game or the Ranger game ended at 10:15, you wouldn't be surprised to see Vince McMahon come on and talk about Spotlight on Madison Square Garden wrestling, and they just show you a match that would get them to 10:30 so they could do the local news or do whatever they were going to do next. And those were really happy times.
They were. And again, when you're an upstater like I was, where it's a lot of rural, you would watch these New York City commercials go, wow, look at what the city looks like, They would always have on the news, they'd have an outdoor shot of the Empire State Building from up high and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I want to get down there. I don't think I was ever in New York City until I was 17 years old.
Wow.
To be honest with you, yeah. Because then I had the freedom and I had a friend with a car and we came down to go to the garden, as I've talked about way too many times. And it's just, I fell in love with the city. I'm still in love with the city. One of our favorite things to do here is on a Sunday afternoon when nothing's going on. I live in Queens. We're fortunate enough to have a bus that stops right 1 block from where we live,
Sure.
goes directly into Midtown.
Wow.
No stops, directly into Midtown. And walking through Manhattan, through the parks, through the shopping, the restaurants, the Broadway scene, the entertainment, Madison Square Garden. I am one lucky son of a gun to live here. Just for that
absolutely.
fun aspect of living in New York City.
Absolutely. My wife and I went up there maybe 10 years ago, landed in LaGuardia, just drove over the bridge. We did a walking tour of Manhattan, and everything was the best. A little hole-in-the-wall Chinese place, best food in the world. If you want to get a pretzel, you want to get a hot dog, you want to get a slice of pizza, it's all there at your fingertips. The best things to see, the shopping, the people watching is so wonderful. And one little TV note that we didn't mention that was like the big event of the year back then for people that like Channel 5, Channel 9, or Channel 11, the Jerry Lewis MDA telethon on Labor Day. The Labor Day telethon was such a extravaganza. And sometimes when I do these podcasts and I'm done after doing maybe a 2 or 3 hour podcast with John McAdam. It's kind of like the end of the telethon where Jerry has to have these helpers carry him off the stage. But those are fun days watching those telethons with all the goofy acts and the firefighters coming out with their checks, and those were happy times.
Yes, I agree. I am, and again, every year that passes by now, I get more and more nostalgic for the old days, and I'm glad you do too. Before I let you go, my friend, just tell people where they can find you on social media or on other podcasts you do. The floor is yours to hype yourself.
Well, I am on with John McAdam on the Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam podcast, which comes out every Friday. I'm on many of the shows. I'm on the Outdated Wrestling Hour with Bob Smith periodically, and that comes out every Friday morning. And also with Tony Richards, the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. I'm on that periodically as well. So those are my podcast appearances. I hope everyone is having a great day listening to this program.
And before I let you go, I just want to thank you one more time because, as many of you know, we talked about at the beginning of the show, I went under the knife at this point 9 weeks ago or something like that. And it set me back. I couldn't podcast. I could not talk. I had oral surgery in a hospital. So before that happened, I'm talking to Steve just off the cuff, and I'm going, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to miss a show. We come out on Fridays with my other podcasts, and I go, I don't want to miss any. If you go away, you die in podcast, and especially if you don't announce it and hype it to people. And even if you're on social media, they won't know. So if your podcast disappears, they think you did too. Steve said, well, I'll do some shows with you. And he was kind enough to come up with some concepts. And we did probably about 4 shows together total. We have never had to stop a week with that podcast, thanks to Steve Gennarelli. So Steve, once again, I just want to thank you humbly for your friendship, professionalism, and of course, what you bring to the table on every podcast you do. So thanks, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Bob. I definitely wouldn't leave you out here by yourself. I definitely want to help you get through this difficult time. And it's always a pleasure being on your show, and I feel honored being on your show.
Well, come back soon.
Well,
And I think our listeners feel the same way. Anytime you have a minute, we'll come up with something to talk about. Steve is also one of the more creative people I've met in my podcast journey. He's always got a concept. He'll send me an instant message. Hey, I got this idea. I got that idea. So I appreciate that too. I really do. So if I don't express that enough, I want you to know that because there's a reason you're on a hit podcast all the time. So thanks again.
Thank you, Bob. Great being here with you.
Folks, this is Steve Gennarelli, and this has been a fun look back at channels 5, 9, and 11. And they just don't make them like that anymore, do they?
Amen.
Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with the elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Outdated Entertainment Hour about old school New York City TV. And we appreciate your patronage here. I do want to give my apologies. We did not have a show during the month of June. That was because, well, I was laid up for a while. If you don't listen to my other podcasts, I have recently had some pretty complex surgery. And unfortunately, that surgery was to my mouth. I had oral surgery. I won't get into the nuts and bolts of what happened, but I'm fine. It's going to be a longish recovery period, but I want to thank everybody who reached out and wrote to me about my convalescence and whatnot. And I really appreciate all of you out there. It's been very heartwarming, and I appreciate it. But I'm back, and we will be back monthly. But I want to announce that coming into the future now that I'm starting to feel myself again, I want to get the schedule of this show back to bi-weekly, like once every 2 weeks. So if you have any topics that you would like to hear us cover on this show, or if you're involved yourself with something that happened many years ago in the entertainment industry, write to me. Outdated Ent, that's outdatedent@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook. I'm Bob Smith. I'm the guy you see singing with B.B. King in my lead page. Yeah, as you know, I was an entertainer of sorts, and I was a magazine editor of sorts, and it's been a charmed life for me because I've had my finger in a lot of different pies. My favorite is blueberry, but that's another story. Well, anyway, like I said, write to us, outdatedent@gmail.com. Our website is outdatedentertainmenthour.buzzsprout.com. All of our episodes are there. We have some really cool stuff from magazines to Broadway shows to classic rock bands to music to TV, as we did now. A lot of different topics. Check it out. I think you'll enjoy hearing all of our old shows. That's it for now. Both the Outdated Entertainment Hour and the Outdated Wrestling Hour are productions of, well, Bob Smith Podcast. I mean, what else would they be? Check us out on Facebook. We'll give you lead-ins on when our next show will be, but we're going to accelerate this schedule as soon as I'm up to snuff. So, looking forward to a tremendous late summer and into the end of this year. Let's have some fun looking back at the old days of old school entertainment. My name's Bob Smith. Until next time, as I sign off all my podcasts, I quote Ringo Starr, who's going to be touring this fall. Keep your eyes out for Ringo. You know what he says during his shows? Peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.